Hi, this is Tisch Aitken, and it is Friday, May 16th, 2025, and we are preparing for the final time that the Sun meets up with Uranus, and they are going to meet up together at 27 degrees and 17 minutes of the fixed Earth sign of Taurus tomorrow at 7:32 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Now, Uranus cycles, we always feel before they're exact. Not that there aren't going to be things going on this weekend, but many of you are probably already feeling the explosive energy. There was an explosion near me, a house explosion. The weather was very explosive this morning in a lot of parts of the East Coast. I think there's a tornado going on. Now it doesn't seem like it, but earlier it was. And surprises, twists, and turns can be very revelatory. Uranus is the higher octave of Mars, but it can raise your anxiety. You could have trouble sleeping. It can be a little bit chaotic. Think of Aquarius. It's ingenious, but it's also unpredictable. And we've been dealing on and off the last couple of years with Pluto, which takes 248 years to transit, going back and forth from the fixed air sign of Aquarius, which again represents the future, ingenuity, chaos, but very much about new beginnings, the future, totally new ways of doing things. And in 2023, Pluto got to 0 degrees of Aquarius for a couple of months, and then it went back into the late degrees of Capricorn. Last year it got a little further along and it got to 2 degrees of Aquarius. This year Pluto did retrograde in the beginning of May, on the 4th of May, but it's not going back to Capricorn. And Uranus is one of the rulers of Aquarius. It's the modern ruler and what most people associate with Aquarius. Technology, aviation, electricity, the maverick, the nonconformist. These are some of the themes. So with this said, Uranus has been transiting in the fixed Earth sign of Taurus since May 15th of 2018. It briefly dipped back into Aries for a few months that fall. It returned in the beginning of 2019, and we've been dealing with that for quite a while. And Taurus is a fixed Earth sign, most associated with the Earth, with Mother Nature. And it doesn't like instant chaos, although my buddy, the Swami, his birthday was yesterday, and he was known, that was his nickname, Instant Chaos. But he was a creative genius. Not everybody can function, and he still had his system, even though it was very chaotic. He had that kind of mind that knew where everything was in the chaos. Not everybody can do that. So most Tauruses probably don't want to do that. And he was a big collector, and he had a huge collection of 78s, and many Tauruses like to collect. And many people with whom he collected were also Tauruses. So what would they do? They would talk music, because it's ruled by Venus. They love music and the arts. They would talk about their 78s. They try to steal 78s from one another, or bargain chip each other. But also they'd get together and have big food outings and eat a bunch of food, because Taurus rules all the 5 senses. And Swami definitely liked to indulge himself and enjoy, and why shouldn't he have? But anyway, so you're probably feeling the very Uranian energy. The moon is now in the sign of Capricorn, where it'll be through early Sunday morning. And the moon in Capricorn is in harmony with this aspect. But again, twists and turns, there could be some very surprising and jarring news. The two are meeting up at 27 degrees and 11 minutes of Taurus, and Venus in Aries is forming a semi-square, which is half of a square. It's 45 degrees away. And that is an uncomfortable energy. And Venus rules the sign of Taurus, and it was retrograde from March 1st through April 12th. And it just cleared its shadow on May 15th, actually yesterday. So we finally have Venus out of its shadow, and we're leaving Taurus season on May 20th, so not much longer. But Venus is out of its shadow. It's in its detriment. Both of the benefics are in their detriment, Venus and Jupiter. But I welcome Venus in Aries right now because it's charging us ahead, and we need to do that. And it's also preparing us, rather, for the big Aries story, which is Saturn and Neptune meeting up at the world point next year on February 20th. That's going to be a huge deal, impacting all of us. And Saturn is the structure, and Neptune is the dream. And we're trying to structure a new dream, and we're also shedding layers. The moon in Scorpio, that full moon we had on Monday, was very intense, but also very transformative and purging. Not only because it was a full moon in Scorpio, but on the day of the full moon, Mercury squared Pluto, which is death and rebirth. And that is eliminating old habits and patterns, which is very much in line with the astrology, because so many outer planets are ingressing into new signs. Pluto at the end of last year finally returned to Aquarius on November 19th, and it's not returning to Capricorn. This is the next 19 years, and then finally it'll be, dipping into Pisces, but that's a while away. And then we have Neptune is newly in the sign of Aries, and it'll retrograde on July 4th, and it'll remain in Aries through October 22nd. But it's still close to the world point. It's, newly in the sign of Aries. And then guess what? A week from tomorrow, this Sun-Uranus conjunction, Saturn leaves the sign of Pisces and ingresses into the cardinal fire sign of Aries, where it'll be through September 1st. And it's going to get to 1 degree and 56 minutes of Aries and retrograde on the 13th of July, but giving us a preview. And Neptune retrogrades on July 4th and gets to 2 degrees and 11 minutes of Aries. So they're going to be close together. They're not meeting up exactly this year, but close enough. Saturn, structure, Neptune, a dream, a new reality. Then later in the year, not far away, Jupiter, which now is out of its shadow as well, in its detriment, but will take a week and take. Jupiter does bring abundance nonetheless. Jupiter ingresses into Cancer, the cardinal water sign of Cancer, on June 9th, where it loves to be. And that's going to bring us a lot of opportunity and expansion, and it's a beautiful energy. But then we're going to have Uranus, the planet of chaos and upheaval and enlightenment, the modern ruler of Aquarius, ingress into the mutable air sign of Gemini, and that'll be very exciting. Uranus does not like being in Taurus. Swami did well with it, but most people don't like. You don't want thunderstorms and tornadoes when you're trying to have security, and that's what I think of. You think of Tauruses are very methodical, and he was in his studies and his work. He was very methodical when he did things, but his place and his office were chaos. And so we are working in a world now of a lot of change and fast, rapid change. But Neptune and Saturn and Uranus all entering masculine signs, meaning fire and air are the masculine signs, water and earth are the feminine. And the only outer planet that is entering a feminine sign this year is Jupiter. But it's exalted in Cancer, so it loves being there. And the other part of this, too, is that with Neptune in Aries, it's kind of like it's figuring out the masculine and the feminine, I feel, because Aries is ruled by Mars, which is such masculine energy. But this is a new reality of merging the two in some ways, of tapping in, it's reconsidering that. And I think the idea that Eris and Chiron are going to meet up in Aries on May 26th at 25 degrees of Aries, that's also, Eris is the goddess of discord who began the Trojan War. And she is, Eris takes 557 years to orbit. And Chiron, the wounded healer, takes a little over 50 years to transit. So the two are meeting up 3 times, the first of which is going to be May 26th. That's urging you to not necessarily start a war and get things, scattered and have instant chaos, which that can be too. But it's about waking people up around you that may be blind to things happening. It's waking yourself up to what you want to fight for, what you want to, choosing your battles of what matters to you, but also realizing that we're in a different time. Many people are feeling very scared right now, and having the confidence to fight for yourself. And, realizing that next year, all of those outer planets that I mentioned, Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, and Saturn are going to be making very harmonious aspects that are going to tap us into a lot of magic. And we're really in the early birthing stage. Pluto is death and rebirth. And this is the first of the last few years where Pluto does not return to Capricorn. And the first year it only got to 0 degrees of Aquarius. So when it did dip into Aquarius. So it's still very early. Pluto takes 248 years to orbit. It moves 2 degrees a year, so it moves very slowly. So knowing that all that we're going through doesn't have to be like this. And Saturn and Neptune together, well, remember earlier this year we had two personal planets retrograde. Mars was retrograde through the end of February, and then Venus was retrograde, and Mercury retrograded, soon after Venus, and they were doing a dance back and forth from Pisces to Aries, Aries to Pisces, etc., and bringing a lot of confusion, meeting up with Saturn, which was restrictions, and Neptune, which is confusion and delusion, and that was confusing. But reassessing and reevaluating what you will do with Saturn and Neptune coming together, we are co-creating on the world front. All is not quiet on the Western front or the world front. We are working to create a new dream and come together to build community. Pluto and Aquarius, Uranus and Gemini, local communities, coming together with love and empathy. Neptune is the higher octave of Venus, but not shying away for fighting for what you believe in, and that is Aries, and that is, that's Aries and Chiron coming together too. And healing your wounds, but also the wounded warrior. The best warriors often are ones that have life experience. And so I think that's something to consider. And so we've got the Sun-Uranus conjunction. We've all been talking about that. Next week is going to be huge, and I'll dive more into Saturn and Aries and what that means for all of us. Whether or not you're an Aries or a cardinal sign, that is impacting everybody, And it will return to Pisces on September 1st. But right now, Saturn is at the final degree of the zodiac. And this is a very difficult placement. And it'll be there through May 24th. And this is where many people may have trouble handling things. It may feel like you can't get out of, you feel imprisoned by your fear, depression, alienation, anxiety. But tapping into that structure, because remember, Saturn and Neptune are coming up with a new theme, and we're going to have a lot of support from the cosmos next year, and even later in the summer with Jupiter in Cancer. That's positive. And when Saturn and Neptune, I should say, return to Pisces, they will be in harmony with Jupiter in Cancer. They will trine Jupiter, so that's helpful. So it's not as bleak as it may seem. I'm not saying it's not easy. It's not easy. I am saying it's not easy. It's very difficult right now. But things getting brought to light, big discoveries, that could happen with the Sun-Uranus conjunction. And Saturn and Aries, again, it's in its fall position because it's exalted in the opposite sign of Libra. But it's still a time of taking charge. I think a lot of this, the astrology is pointing us to that direction, to move ahead, even if there are challenges. There will be, inevitably. That's not going to go away overnight. And Neptune, again, initiating a whole new dream. Neptune hasn't been in Aries since 1861. So that's a big deal. And over this weekend, too, we're going to have Mercury square Mars, and that's going to occur tomorrow at 9:36 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, and on the 18th at 12:36 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Now, again, just like Uranus, we feel Mars energy before it's exact. There could be accidents with that. Definitely with Uranus, there can be accidents. Both Uranus and Mars can trigger accidents. But that explosive energy, people losing their temper. The Sun and Uranus are going to be, again, semi-square Venus. Venus being the ruler of the Sun in Taurus. People could get triggered. People could have disagreements. They could definitely get into fights very impulsively. Think of your words. Be cautious with your words. Be cautious on the road. This is excellent energy for brainstorming, for doing work, for writing, tapping into really unlimited possibilities. But in terms of dealing with other people, it could be kind of chaotic. So just recognizing that. And the moon will go void, of course, on, let's see, at 12, I believe it's 12:24 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and it's going to enter Aquarius, this I do remember, at 1:29 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So on the 18th, the moon is now in Aquarius, and it meets up with Pluto, the planet of death and rebirth, the cosmic compost, at 8:34 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And that could be heavy, but it's also purging energy. And there's a lot of energy around healing on Sunday. At 9:44 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Chiron forms a harmonious aspect to Jupiter. The two are sextile. That's an aspect of opportunity, bringing you optimism in healing with courage. Chiron in Aries, Jupiter bringing some optimism. Then we're going to have later in the afternoon, we're going to have the north node, Jupiter square the north node of karma. And that occurs at 2:36 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And that is, I think, bringing fated opportunities and connections. I don't see that as pejorative, even though it's a square. I think it gets things going. And then we have the north node semi-sextile, Chiron, the wounded healer, and that will occur at 11:17 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Again, bringing some discomfort but opportunity to heal. And again, realize that through next Saturday, this is like when Saturn in your chart, when it comes to your first house. The 12th house is the final house. There are 12 houses. The 12th house is the final house, and it's the Pisces house. Whether you have another sign on that cusp, it embodies Pisces themes. And when Saturn comes to your ascendant, which happens every 29 years approximately, right before Saturn enters that, you could feel a sense of tension, and then it crosses your ascendant, ushering in a major new beginning. And when Saturn's in your first house, again, that could be like having it in its fall position. But I find for people, and I had it not long ago, it was very constructive for your goals, for what you want to accomplish. A lot of people get in big relationships when Saturn's in the first house. And with Saturn in Aries, thinking of what you want to propel forward. It's the very first sign of the zodiac. So realizing that right now Saturn is at the final degree of the zodiac, embodying all the lessons, all the pain, all of the wisdom of all of the preceding signs. So, arm yourself up. I've got my clear quartz that is very important to me. I've got a lot of other crystals. I've got them behind me. But, burn Palo Santo. If somebody's bothering you and you don't wish them, I hope you wouldn't wish them ill will, but write their name on a piece of paper and put it in the freezer. Freeze out the negative energy. Put salt out to absorb negativity. Do whatever it is to bring you some good vibes. And I think that, recognize that we have a lot of opportunity to heal. Jupiter ingressing into Cancer in June is going to be awesome. And, I think Uranus and Gemini is going to be pretty awesome. So good luck, take care, and have a good weekend. Take care.